I stared at the email notification, my coffee growing cold beside my laptop. The subject line was simple. Closing confirmed, the Obsidian, Unit 712. My hands trembled slightly as I clicked it open. The message contained just a few lines confirming the successful purchase, but those words represented so much more. It was the final piece, the crown jewel in Everett's portfolio, and now it was mine. Before we jump into my story, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years ago, my husband had looked me in the eyes and told me I wouldn't last 6 months without his financial support. Now I owned every single property that once bore his name. You never really know someone until they believe they have. Nothing left to lose. Or, in my case, until they believe they have everything to gain by leaving you behind. I met Everett Thornhill at a charity gala in Meridian. I was 28, working as an event coordinator for the Historical Society, and he was 35, already making waves in Cascadia Bay's real estate market. His confidence was magnetic, his ambition infectious. When he spoke about transforming the coastline with his vision for luxury developments, I was captivated not just by his dreams, but by how attainable they seemed when he described them. Our courtship was a whirlwind of helicopter rides to seaside, lots and champagne toasts on the balconies of half-constructed buildings. "This will all be ours one day," he'd whisper, and I believed him. Within 6 months, we were married in a lavish ceremony at the Promenade, his first successful commercial project, a boutique hotel that overlooked the cliffs of Cascadia Bay. The early years of our marriage paralleled his rising success. Thornhill. Properties expanded from a single development to a portfolio spanning 3 coastal towns. Our home in Westridge Heights became a showcase for potential investors, and I became adept at hosting dinner parties where multi-million-dollar deals were sealed over dessert. I was the perfect partner, supportive, elegant, and most importantly to Everett, impressed by his achievements. What he never bothered to learn was that before we met, I'd completed a master's degree in urban development and had spent 2 years working for my father's international investment firm. I understood the intricacies of his business perhaps better than he realized, but Everett preferred me in the role of admiring wife, not business partner, so I played my part. The fractures in our marriage began approximately 5 years in. Coinciding with the coastal development boom, Everett became obsessed with expanding his empire, working later, celebrating bigger, and coming home less. At first, I told myself this was temporary, the necessary sacrifice for his dream. Our dream. Then came the afternoon I discovered the raw text messages from Brielle, his 23-year-old assistant. They weren't just planning properties together. The affair had been ongoing for months, conducted in the penthouse suite of the Obsidian, the very building he'd once described as our legacy. When confronted, Everett didn't deny it. Instead, he laughed, a cold, dismissive sound I'd never heard from him before. "Did you really think someone like me stays with one woman forever? This lifestyle requires certain adaptations." I requested time to think, to process this betrayal. But Everett, ever the businessman, saw an opportunity to cut his losses. 2 days later, I returned from visiting my mother to find the locks changed on our Westridge Heights home and a manila envelope taped to the door. Inside was a divorce petition and a handwritten note. "I've spoken with my lawyers. You'll get the vacation house in Pine Harbor and a settlement. It's generous considering you brought nothing to this marriage but decorating tips. Let's be honest. Thalia, you wouldn't survive 6 months in the real world without my money. You should thank me for the Pine Harbor property. It's more than you deserve." I sat in my car outside what had been my home for 6 years, reading those words over and over. The dismissal, the contempt, the absolute certainty that I was nothing without him. Something crystallized in me that afternoon. Not just anger or hurt, but a clear, cold purpose. Everett had always underestimated me. He assumed I spent my days shopping and planning parties, that I had no understanding of his business empire. He never noticed that I listened during every investor meeting, that I reviewed every property prospectus, that I'd built relationships with everyone in his professional circle while he was too busy expanding his influence to pay attention. Most importantly, he had no idea about my family's wealth or the trust fund I'd never touched, the one my father had established when I earned my master's degree. "For when you find the right investment," Dad had said. I'd been waiting for that moment, and ironically, Everett had just created it. I drove directly to the Perch, a converted lighthouse on the northern edge of Cascadia Bay that my grandmother had left me years before. Everett had dismissed it as quaint but commercially worthless when I'd suggested renovating it. I'd kept it nonetheless, occasionally disappearing there to read or sketch designs when Everett was traveling. Now, it would become my command center. My first call was to Zora Winters, an old university friend who had become one of the most respected real estate attorneys in Meridian. I'd maintained our friendship despite Everett's dismissal of her as too academic for practical business. Her voice was cautious when she answered. "Thalia, I heard rumors about you and Everett. Are you okay?" "I need your help, Zora. But first, I need your absolute discretion." There was a pause, then, "You've always had it. What do you need?" "I want to buy Everett's properties, all of them, without him knowing it's me." Another pause, longer this time. "Thalia, that's ambitious. Thornhill Properties is worth— I know exactly what it's worth," I interrupted. "Down to the last mortgage and lien, and I have the resources to do it." 6 hours later, Zora arrived at the Perch with takeout containers and a legal pad already half filled with notes. We sat at my grandmother's old oak table overlooking the bay as I outlined my plan. "Everett expands too quickly," I explained. "He leverages each property to finance the next. His cash reserves are minimal. Everything goes back into new acquisitions. If we approach each property through different investment entities, we can acquire them one by one." Zora looked skeptical. "Even if that's possible, why would he sell?" "These properties are his identity." I smiled for the first time in days. "Because I know something he doesn't. The Meridian City Council is about to rezone the Harbor District, where his next major development is planned. Environmental studies have raised concerns. His current plans won't be approved, and he's already invested millions in preliminary work." Zora's eyebrows shot up. "How do you know this?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The council president's wife is in my book club. She's also an environmental scientist who consulted on the study. Everett never bothered to join me for those boring social events. "So he'll be cash-strapped and looking to offload properties quickly," Zora mused. "But still, for him to sell his entire portfolio." "We won't approach all at once. We'll start with the properties that are underperforming, the ones he complains about when he's had too much scotch, and we'll offer slightly above market value, enough to be tempting when he's facing a financial crisis." Zora began making notes. "We'll need to create separate LLCs for each acquisition, different attorneys for each transaction, and we'll need someone local who understands property management once we start acquiring these properties." "I know just the person," I said, thinking of Indira Mehta, a brilliant property manager who Everett had once dismissed for being too focused on tenant satisfaction instead of maximizing profit. That night, after Zora left with a preliminary plan in place, I stood on the lighthouse balcony watching the lights of Cascadia Bay. Somewhere in that glittering landscape was Everett, probably celebrating his freedom, confident in his assessment that I would crumble without him. He had no idea what was coming. The first acquisition was the Promenade, the boutique hotel where we'd been married. It was a sentimental choice, but also strategic. The property had been underperforming for the past year, with occupancy rates dropping as newer hotels opened along the waterfront. Through a newly formed LLC called New Horizon Investments, Zora presented an offer 12% above market value. Everett's company accepted within 48 hours. I visited the property the day after closing, introducing myself to the manager as a representative of the new ownership. It took every ounce of self-control not to reveal who I really was, but patience was essential. I implemented immediate changes, renovations to the dated lobby, partnerships with local artists to feature their work in the rooms, and a complete overhaul of their digital marketing strategy. Within 3 months, occupancy rates had increased by 22%. The success bolstered my confidence and provided additional capital for the next phase of my plan. Meanwhile, as predicted, Everett's development plans for the Harbor District were denied by the City Council. The news made the front page of the Cascadia Bay Chronicle, with quotes from environmental groups celebrating the decision. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Through a different LLC, we approached Thornhill Properties about acquiring the Westridge Commercial Plaza, a mixed-use development that had been struggling to maintain tenants. Again, we offered above-market value, presenting ourselves as investment opportunists looking to capitalize on distressed properties. Everett was too proud to admit his properties were distressed, but too pragmatic to refuse the cash infusion. The sale was completed in record time. With each acquisition, I was careful to maintain my distance. Zora handled all negotiations, using different legal representatives for each transaction. Indira managed the properties once they were acquired, implementing changes that quickly increased their value and profitability. 8 months into my plan, I had acquired 7 of Everett's 15 properties. The real estate community began to murmur about Thornhill Properties' apparent downsizing, but Everett maintained a confident public facade, claiming he was streamlining operations to focus on signature developments. I knew better. Through carefully cultivated connections, I learned he was scrambling to secure additional financing for the Obsidian's final phase. His relationship with Brielle had ended messily, with rumors that she was threatening a workplace harassment lawsuit. His once sterling reputation was beginning to tarnish. Meanwhile, I remained officially retired from public life following our divorce. The settlement had been finalized quickly, with Everett so confident in my incompetence that he hadn't even pushed for a detailed accounting of my assets. As far as he knew, I was living quietly in the Pine Harbor vacation house, surviving on the settlement and perhaps some family support. In reality, I was building an empire from the shadows. The perch had been transformed into a sophisticated operations center. The rustic living room now housed multiple monitors tracking property performances. The kitchen table was perpetually covered with blueprints and development plans. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by purpose and the sweet anticipation of vindication. It was during this period that Dominic Reeves, Everett's longtime business partner, reached out to me. The message came through Zora, who had been approached, directly after a real estate conference in Meridian. "He wants to meet," she told me over the secure line we'd established. "Says he has information you might find valuable." I was immediately suspicious. Did he indicate he knows what we're doing? No, but he seemed concerned about Everett's business decisions lately, and curious about your well-being. Dominic had always been the more thoughtful of the partnership, the detail-oriented planner who balanced Everett's grand visions. While never particularly close to me, he had always been respectful, sometimes even apologetic for Everett's more dismissive behaviors. After careful consideration, I agreed to meet him at a small cafe in Meridian, far from Cascadia Bay's gossipy social circles. He recognized me immediately despite my deliberately understated appearance. Jeans, a simple blouse, and minimal makeup. A far cry from the designer wardrobe I'd worn as Mrs. Thornhill. "Thalia," he said, standing as I approached. "Thank you for meeting me." I slid into the booth across from him. "I'm curious about what could be so important, Dominic. We were never exactly confidants." He had the grace to look slightly ashamed. I know. I should have reached out after. Everything. But business relationships are complicated. Yes. I've learned that quite thoroughly. I kept my tone neutral, giving away nothing. Dominic stirred his coffee unnecessarily. Everett's making mistakes. Serious ones. The Harbor District rejection hit harder than he's admitting. He's leveraged the Obsidian to its breaking point to keep things afloat. I raised an eyebrow. And you're telling me this because I'm getting out. He leaned forward. I'm selling my 30% stake in Thornhill Properties. I've already begun discussing terms with potential buyers. This was unexpected information, valuable beyond measure. Dominic's 30% stake included partial ownership in all remaining Thornhill properties, including the Obsidian. I appreciate the information, I said carefully, but again, why tell me? Dominic looked directly into my eyes. Because I know it's you. My heartbeat quickened, but I kept my expression impassive. Excuse me? The acquisitions, New Horizon Investments, Cascade Opportunity Group, Meridian Harbor Developments, all those companies buying Thornhill properties over the last 8 months. He smiled slightly. I did the research Everett never bothered to do, traced the ownership structures back as far as publicly possible. I can't prove it conclusively, but I know your strategic thinking. This has your signature all over it. For a moment, I considered denying everything. But something in Dominic's expression told me this wasn't a threat. And if it were me? I asked. Then I'd want to offer you first right of refusal on my 30% stake. He slid a folder across the table. At a friend's price. I stared at him. We're not friends, Dominic. No, he agreed. But I always respected you. And I never agreed with how Everett treated you at the end or throughout your marriage. He tapped the folder. Consider it my apology for not saying something sooner. I didn't touch the folder. Why not just sell to one of those mysterious companies you mentioned? He laughed softly. Because I want Everett to know, eventually. He told everyone who would listen that you'd never survive without him, that you didn't understand the first thing about business. He shook his head. I think he deserves to learn just how wrong he was. I picked up the folder and placed it in my bag without looking at it. I'll consider your offer. As I stood to leave, Dominic said quietly, he's hosting a showcase event for potential investors next month at the Obsidian. Final phase funding. It's his last shot at salvaging his reputation. I nodded once, then walked away, my mind already racing with possibilities. Dominic's stake would change everything. The timeline I'd projected for acquiring Everett's complete portfolio had just accelerated dramatically. That evening, I reviewed Dominic's offer with Zora. The terms were indeed favorable, below market value, with flexible financing options. This changes our strategy, Zora noted. With his 30% stake, plus the properties we've already acquired, you'd control a majority interest in Thornhill properties. You could potentially force decisions at the corporate level. I shook my head. That's not the end game. I don't want to control Thornhill properties. I want to erase it completely. I tapped the investment prospectus for the Obsidian. And I want to own this outright, not just a percentage. Zora leaned back in her chair. So, we continue as planned? Separate acquisitions until you've claimed everything? Yes, but with an accelerated timeline, and with a slight modification. I smiled. I think it's time for me to make a public reappearance. The annual Cascadia Bay Property Showcase was the premier real estate event on the coast, bringing together developers, investors, and luxury property buyers for a weekend of networking and deal-making. This year, it would be hosted at the Obsidian, Everett's flagship development and the centerpiece of his remaining portfolio. It was time to step out of the shadows. The morning of the Cascadia Bay Property Showcase arrived with picture-perfect weather, bright sunshine glinting off the bay, gentle breezes carrying the scent of salt and possibility. I stood at the windows of the perch, watching distant figures set up the grand pavilion outside the Obsidian. Even from this distance, the sleek black glass exterior of Everett's Pride and Joy dominated the waterfront, designed to command attention and respect, much like the man himself. Zora arrived precisely at 9, carrying a garment bag and a portfolio. Case. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, setting down her things. "Once you appear publicly, Everett will be watching your every move. The element of surprise is already gone," I finished for her. "Dominic suspects. Others might too. Better to control the narrative than hide from it." I gestured to the garment bag. "Is that what I think it is?" Zora unzipped it with a flourish, revealing a stunning architectural masterpiece of a dress. Midnight, blue with structural elements that mimicked the coastline's dramatic cliffs. "Indira's friend delivered it this morning. Custom made according to your specifications." I ran my fingers along the fabric. Perfect. Nothing says, "I've moved on" like couture. The transformation took 2 hours. Hair swept into an elegant updo that highlighted my cheekbones, makeup subtle but flawless, jewelry minimal but impactful, diamond drop earrings that had belonged to my grandmother, their value obvious to anyone with an educated eye. The dress fit perfectly, creating a silhouette that was sophisticated, powerful, and undeniably feminine. The woman in the mirror bore little resemblance to the broken wife who had sat in her car reading divorce papers 8 months ago. "You look like someone who buys buildings for breakfast," Zora approved, handing me a small portfolio containing information about Dominic's stake. "Remember, today is reconnaissance only. Make an appearance, gauge reactions, plant seeds of doubt, and sign the preliminary agreement with Dominic," I added. We had arranged to meet discreetly during the showcase to formalize our arrangement. The drive to the Obsidian took 20 minutes, time I used to center myself, to recall every dismissive comment, every time Everett had treated me as decorative rather than substantive. By the time the valet opened my car door, I was armored in calm purpose. The Obsidian's lobby was a symphony of black marble and dramatic lighting, crowded now with the West Coast's real estate elite. I noticed the subtle shift in the room as I entered. The double takes, the whispered conversations behind cocktail glasses, the speculative glances. My appearance was clearly unexpected. I accepted a champagne flute from a passing server and moved through the space with deliberate grace, pausing to greet acquaintances with warm smiles that revealed nothing. Many seemed uncertain how to respond. Allegiances in high society divorces were tricky terrain, but curiosity overwhelmed caution for most. "Thalia, what a wonderful surprise," Vivian Lancaster, the doyenne of Cascadia Bay's social scene, approached with air kisses. "We've missed you at the Historical Society events." "I've been focused on new ventures," I replied pleasantly. "But I couldn't miss the showcase. So many interesting developments to explore." Vivian's eyes gleamed with the prospect of fresh gossip. "Indeed. Are you looking to invest? I had assumed with the divorce that I'd be financially adrift?" I finished with a light laugh. "Life is full of surprises, Vivian. Speaking of which, how is the fundraising going for the Harbor Preservation Project? I've been considering a significant contribution." The mention of money, specifically money that might benefit her pet project, immediately recalibrated Vivian's assessment of my situation. Her smile widened. "We should absolutely discuss that. Perhaps over lunch next week?" "My assistant will call yours," I promised, already scanning the room over her shoulder. No sign of Everett yet, but I spotted Dominic near the scale model of the Obsidian's final phase. Our eyes met briefly, his slight nod confirming our planned meeting. For the next hour, I circulated strategically, engaging in conversations that subtly established my continued connection to Cascadia Bay's development community. I asked pointed questions about recent acquisitions, commented knowledgeably on zoning changes, and dropped carefully crafted hints about my interest in meaningful investment opportunities. Every interaction was an exercise in calculated information management, revealing enough to generate speculation, but never confirming anything outright. The event shifted to the outdoor pavilion for the formal presentations. I chose a seat near the back, partially obscured by a decorative pillar but with a clear view of the stage. The program listed Everett as the keynote speaker, scheduled to unveil the Obsidian's final phase. A sudden hush fell over the crowd, followed by a ripple of murmurs. Everett had arrived, flanked by his executive team. He looked thinner than I remembered, the confident swagger slightly diminished, though his custom suit and practiced smile worked hard to conceal it. A young woman walked slightly behind him, not Brielle, but similarly styled with long blonde hair and a too-tight dress. Apparently he had a type. I remained perfectly still as he passed within 15 feet of my seat, his attention focused on the many hands extended for shaking, the sycophantic greetings from those hoping to bask in his diminishing glow. He didn't notice me, which was precisely as I'd planned. The presentations began with predictable self-congratulation, statistics about Cascadia Bay's growing luxury market, projections for continued appreciation, assurances that environmental concerns were being addressed through innovative sustainability initiatives. I noted with interest that several speakers referenced the mysterious buying spree that had reshaped ownership of prime properties over the past year, with theories ranging from foreign investment groups to technology billionaires, seeking tax advantages. Finally, Everett took the stage, commanding attention with well-practiced charisma. "Distinguished colleagues, valued investors, and friends," he began, his voice carrying the polished resonance that had once captivated me. "Today marks the culmination of a vision 7 years in the making. The Obsidian isn't just a building, it's a statement about the future of coastal luxury living." The presentation screen behind him illuminated with stunning renderings of the final phase, a soaring addition to the existing structure that would include ultra-premium residences, a world-class spa, and a rooftop restaurant with 360-degree views. The design was admittedly breathtaking, focusing on sustainability features like living walls and state-of-the-art water reclamation systems. "We've already secured commitments for 60% of the available units," Everett continued, projecting confidence despite the telltale tightness around his eyes. "But today I'm offering a singular opportunity to be part of something truly transformative." He outlined the investment structure, private equity shares with projected returns that seemed optimistic even by luxury development standards. I made careful notes, recognizing the desperation disguised as exclusivity. Everett needed this funding not just for the Obsidian's completion, but for his company's survival. "Following the presentation, my team will be available in the model units to discuss specific investment opportunities," he concluded. "Together, we'll create the crown jewel of the Pacific coastline." Applause followed, enthusiastic from those new to the industry, measured from the veterans who recognized the familiar dance of high-end development pitches. I clapped politely, watching as Everett's gaze swept the audience with practiced appreciation. And then it happened. His eyes found mine. For a moment so brief others might have missed it, Everett Thornhill's composed facade cracked. His expression shifted from confident to shocked, to something harder. Anger mingled with disbelief. I maintained eye contact, my face a study in pleasant neutrality, then deliberately turned to comment something to the person beside me. When I looked back at the stage, Everett had recovered, but his rhythm was disrupted. He stumbled slightly over his closing remarks, then exited the stage with rigid shoulders. Phase 1 of today's mission, accomplished. I waited until the crowd dispersed toward the model unit tours before slipping away to meet Dominic. We had arranged to connect in the Obsidian's business center, a space likely to be empty during the main event, but still public enough to avoid appearing secretive. The room was empty as expected, its wall of windows overlooking the marina. Dominic arrived moments after I did, closing the door behind him. "Quite an entrance you made," he remarked, removing a folder from his briefcase. Everett looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Not a ghost," I corrected. "Just someone he underestimated." Dominic's laugh held genuine appreciation. The dress was a power move. Nicely done. We sat at opposite sides of the conference table, maintaining professional distance. "I've reviewed your offer," I said, opening my portfolio. "The terms are acceptable, with 2 modifications." I slid a document across the table. First, an accelerated closing, 5 business days instead of 30. Second, I want right of first refusal on any remaining Thornhill properties that come to market in the next 6 months. Dominic raised an eyebrow as he scanned the revised agreement. Aggressive timeline. "Necessary," I countered. "The showcase will generate interest. I prefer to complete our transaction before new players enter the field." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "You've changed, Thalia." "Not just the exterior, though that's certainly impressive. There's something different about your fundamental energy." "Clarity," I said simply. "I know exactly what I want now." "And what happens when you get it? When you own everything Everett built?" I smiled, the expression not quite reaching my eyes. "That's the best part, Dominic. I haven't decided yet." He laughed again, genuinely this time, and signed the revised agreement. I added my signature, and just like that, I owned 30% of what remained of Thornhill properties. "He'll know something's happening when the paperwork is filed," Dominic cautioned as we stood to leave. "The news of my withdrawal will hit the industry by tomorrow afternoon." "Perfect timing," I replied. "I should get back to the event. I believe Everett and I are long overdue for a conversation." Dominic's eyes widened slightly. "You're going to confront him today? That wasn't part of the plan we discussed." "Plans evolve," I said calmly. "Don't worry, I won't jeopardize our arrangement. But some opportunities are too perfect to waste." Returning to the main event, I deliberately toured the model units where Everett was scheduled to host potential investors. The spaces were impeccably designed. Open floor plans with floor-to-ceiling windows framing ocean views, kitchens with imported Italian marble, bathrooms reminiscent of luxury spas. In another life, I might have chosen one of these units for our pied-à-terre. I lingered in the penthouse model, listening as Everett delivered his pitch to a small group of interested buyers. His voice carried from the great room, confident, persuasive, every inch the successful developer despite the financial realities hidden beneath the surface. When the group moved into the master suite for that portion of the tour, I positioned myself by the windows overlooking the bay, a champagne flute in hand, the picture of casual interest. I knew the exact moment he registered my presence, the infinitesimal pause in his description of the custom closet systems, the almost imperceptible tightening of his shoulders. Professional to the core, Everett completed the tour, answering questions with practiced ease while studiously avoiding eye contact with me. After exchanging business cards and promises of follow-up meetings, he ushered the potential investors toward the door, where his assistant waited to escort them to the next activity. Then, finally, we were alone. Thalia. My name emerged as something between a statement and a question, his tone carefully modulated to reveal nothing. This is unexpected. I turned from the window, allowing the afternoon sun to backlight me. Is it? I received an invitation like everyone else. The Cascadia Bay property showcase is a public event. Everett's jaw tightened. You know what I mean? You've been absent from the social circuit. I've been busy, I replied, taking a deliberate sip of champagne. His eyes narrowed, assessing my appearance, my demeanor, searching for signs of the wounded ex-wife he expected. Finding none. His expression shifted to something more calculating. Pine Harbor suits you then? the settlement was adequate? The question carried the barest hint of condescension. I smiled. I haven't been to Pine Harbor in months, actually. Sold it in January. Lovely profit. Waterfront properties have appreciated significantly this year. This was clearly not the response he anticipated. Everett took a step closer, lowering his voice despite us being alone. What game are you playing, Thalia? Why show up here today? Game? I echoed, affecting surprise. I'm simply attending an industry event. As someone with growing real estate interests, it seemed appropriate. The phrase, growing real estate, interest hit its mark. Everett's expression flickered between disbelief and suspicion. What are you talking about? I placed my empty champagne flute on a side table. Interesting presentation earlier. Ambitious projections for the Obsidians. Final phase. Though I noticed you didn't mention the financing challenges. 3 banks have declined your construction loan applications, haven't they? His face paled slightly. How did you know that? I finished for him. The same way I know about the lawsuit Brielle quietly settled, or the fact that you've mortgaged your Westridge Heights residence to cover operating expenses. I moved toward him, my voice steady and calm. I pay attention, Everett. I always did. You just never noticed. Anger replaced shock, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Whatever you think you know. I know everything, I interrupted. Gently. Including the fact that Dominic sold his stake in Thornhill Properties this afternoon. This news, the one thing I was certain he hadn't yet learned, knocked the remaining confidence from his posture. Everett reached for the back of a chair to steady himself. That's not possible. He would have told me. Actually, the paperwork was signed about 20 minutes ago, I continued, maintaining the same conversational tone one might use to discuss the weather. He seemed quite eager to divest before today's announcements. Everett's business mask slipped entirely, raw emotion breaking through. To whom? Who bought his stake? I smiled, the expression reaching my eyes this time. That's not public information yet. Pine Harbor suits you then? The settlement was adequate? The question carried the barest hint of condescension. I smiled. I haven't been to Pine Harbor in months, actually. Sold it in January. Lovely profit. Waterfront properties have appreciated significantly this year. This was clearly not the response he anticipated. Everett took a step closer, lowering his voice despite us being alone. What game are you playing, Thalia? Why show up here today? Game? I echoed, affecting surprise. I'm simply attending an industry event. As someone with growing real estate interests, it seemed appropriate. The phrase, growing real estate, interests, hit its mark. Everett's expression flickered between disbelief and suspicion. What are you talking about? I placed my empty champagne flute on a side table. Interesting presentation earlier. Ambitious projections for the Obsidians. Final phase. Though I noticed you didn't mention the financing challenges. 3 banks have declined your construction loan applications, haven't they? His face paled slightly. How did you know that? I finished for him. The same way I know about the lawsuit Brielle quietly settled, or the fact that you've mortgaged your Westridge Heights residence to cover operating expenses. I moved toward him, my voice steady and calm. I pay attention, Everett. I always did. You just never noticed. Anger replaced shock, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Whatever you think you know. I know everything, I interrupted. Gently. Including the fact that Dominic sold his stake in Thornhill Properties this afternoon. This news, the one thing I was certain he hadn't yet learned, knocked the remaining confidence from his posture. Everett reached for the back of a chair to steady himself. That's not possible. He would have told me. Actually, the paperwork was signed about 2, though I imagine you'll find out soon enough. Understanding dawned slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to a dawning horror. You? No, that's impossible. You don't have that kind of money, that kind of knowledge. Oh, Everett, I sighed, almost sympathetically. You never did bother to learn anything real about me, did you? Not my family background, not my education, not my capabilities. I moved toward the door, pausing beside him. Remember what you wrote in that charming note you left with the divorce papers? That I wouldn't survive 6 months in the real world without your money? His breathing had become shallow, eyes fixed on me with growing comprehension. It's been 8 months, I said softly, and I'm doing just fine. Before he could respond, I walked out, leaving him standing alone in the model penthouse of the building that might not be his much longer. The remainder of the showcase passed in a surreal blur. I networked purposefully, connecting with key industry figures, expressing interest in specific properties, and laying groundwork for the next phase of my plan. Everett was noticeably absent from the closing reception, his assistant making excuses about urgent business matters. By the time I returned to the perch that evening, my phone was filled with voicemails and text messages, some from curious acquaintances who had witnessed the subtle drama of the day, others from industry contacts, suddenly eager to connect. Most tellingly, 3 messages from Everett himself, the tone evolving from demanding to uncertain to almost pleading. I ignored them all, instead calling Zora to update her on the day's developments. You moved too quickly, she admonished after I recounted my confrontation with Everett. We agreed to keep your involvement quiet until we had secured more properties. Plans change, I replied, kicking off my heels and pouring a glass of wine. Dominic selling his stake accelerated our timeline. Better to control the narrative than react to it. Zora sighed, the sound of shuffling papers coming through the line. Well, it's done now, and I just received confirmation that the transfer of Dominic's shares will be completed by Wednesday. Once that's official, you'll effectively control 3/5 of Thornhill Properties' assets. Not enough, I said firmly. I want it all, especially the obsidian. That may be more complicated now. Everett will be on high alert, possibly looking to block any further acquisitions if he suspects you're behind them. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. That's why we're going to approach him directly. No more shell companies, no more proxies. Tomorrow morning, I want you to send a formal offer from me personally for the remaining Thornhill properties. Silence stretched across the line. Are you sure about this? Once we show our full hand? He already knows, I interrupted. He just doesn't want to believe it. The official offer will force him to confront reality. I took a sip of wine, savoring both the rich flavor and the moment. Besides, humiliation has always been Everett's greatest fear. The prospect of everyone knowing his ex-wife is systematically acquiring his life's work? 20 minutes ago, I continued, maintaining the same conversational tone one might use to discuss the weather. He seemed quite eager to divest before today's announcements. Everett's business mask slipped entirely, raw emotion breaking through. To whom? Who bought his stake? I smiled, the expression reaching my eyes this time. That's not public information yet. He might agree to sell just to control how the story unfolds. Zora's laugh held reluctant admiration. Remind me never to cross you. Her tone turned serious. What offer should I prepare? 10% below market value for the portfolio, excluding the obsidian. I moved to the windows, looking out toward the lights of the bay. For the obsidian, offer exactly what he's invested so far, not a penny more. He needs to understand this isn't a negotiation. It's a rescue. He'll counter, Zora warned. Let him, I replied. Every day he delays, his position weakens, and after today's showcase, potential investors will be calling Dominic, not Everett. The word is already spreading. After ending the call with, Zora, I allowed myself a rare moment of emotional reflection. Standing on the balcony of the perch, I remembered the afternoon Everett had first brought me to Cascadia Bay, his arm around my waist as he described his vision for transforming the waterfront. His passion had been intoxicating then, his ambition something I had admired rather than recognized as the warning sign it was. "This whole bay could be ours," he had said, kissing my temple. "We'll build something extraordinary together." How? Ironic that his prediction was coming true, though not in the way either of us had imagined. My phone buzzed again, another call from Everett. This time I answered. "Thalia." His voice was strained, the single word carrying a complex emotional weight. "It's late, Everett," I replied calmly. "What do you want?" "We need to talk. Whatever you think you're doing?" "It's not what I think I'm doing," I cut in. "It's what I am doing. But yes, we should talk. My attorney will be contacting yours tomorrow with a formal offer. I suggest you review it carefully." His breathing was audible, uneven. "This is absurd. You can't possibly have the resources to—" "You never asked about my family's holdings," I interrupted again. "Never showed interest in my education, my knowledge. You assumed I had nothing to contribute beyond social connections and interior design opinions." I kept my voice level, factual rather than accusatory. "That was your first mistake." Silence stretched between us, heavy with realization. "Why?" he finally asked, the single word carrying genuine bewilderment. "If you had these resources, this capability all along, why waste years playing the supportive wife? Why not build your own empire?" The question was so perfectly Everett, unable to comprehend motivations beyond power and possession, that I almost laughed. "Because unlike you, I didn't need an empire to feel valuable," I answered honestly. "I chose to support your vision because I loved you, until you made it abundantly clear that the feeling wasn't mutual." Another silence, longer this time. "The note," he said finally. "What I wrote about you not surviving without me. I was angry, Thalia. People say exactly what they believe in moments of anger," I corrected. "You showed me who you really were, Everett, and then you gave me the perfect motivation to show you who I really am." I could almost see him processing this, recalibrating his understanding of our shared history, of me. "So this is revenge," he concluded. "Destroying everything I've built because I hurt your pride." "No," I said simply. "This is business. You undervalued an asset, and I recognized an opportunity." I paused, letting the irony sink in. "Isn't that what you always taught me about real estate? Find the undervalued asset and capitalize on it before others recognize its worth." His laugh was hollow, disbelieving. "Using my own principles against me. Brilliant." "Review the offer, Everett," I said, steering the conversation back to practical matters. "It's fair, considering your position. More than fair, actually." "And if I refuse?" "Then we proceed with acquiring the remaining properties individually, likely at less favorable terms for you. The Obsidian's financing will fall through once investors learn about Dominic's departure. The banks will call your loans. You know how this plays out." The businessman in him recognized the truth in my assessment. I could hear it in his silence. "I'll review the offer," he finally conceded, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Wise decision," I replied. "Good night, Everett." I ended the call, setting my phone on the balcony ledge. Below, the waves crashed against the rocks, a rhythmic reminder of forces more powerful and persistent than human ambition. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel the full spectrum of emotions I had carefully channeled into strategic action. The hurt of betrayal, the sting of dismissal, the sweet satisfaction of reclaiming my power. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Everett wouldn't surrender his remaining properties without a fight, regardless of what he had implied on the phone. The business community would be buzzing with speculation about my sudden emergence as a serious player. In Cascadia Bay real estate, former friends would choose sides, alliances would shift, and I would need to navigate a social landscape I had once managed as Everett's wife, but never as his adversary. But tonight, standing in the lighthouse my grandmother had left me, the property Everett had deemed commercially worthless, I allowed myself to savor the progress already made. In 8 months, I had acquired 7 Thornhill properties outright and now controlled a 30% stake in the remaining portfolio. The empire Everett had spent a decade building was already more than half mine, and I was just getting started. The next morning dawned with a clarity that matched my purpose. I dressed with deliberate simplicity, tailored black trousers, a cream silk blouse, minimal jewelry, the uniform of a serious businesswoman rather than the statement piece of yesterday's showcase appearance. Today wasn't about making an impression, it was about executing the next phase of the plan. Zora arrived at 9 with the formal offer prepared, a comprehensive document detailing the proposed acquisition of all remaining Thornhill properties, including specific terms for the Obsidian. The price was fair but firm, the conditions non-negotiable: complete transfer of ownership, retention of key staff, and a non-competition clause preventing Everett from developing in Cascadia Bay for 5 years. "It's aggressive," Zora noted, as I reviewed the final draft. "He'll balk at the non-compete clause especially." "He'll complain about all of it," I replied, signing the cover letter. "But he'll sign eventually. The alternatives are worse." As Zora prepared to deliver the offer to Everett's attorneys, my phone chimed with a news alert. I opened it to find a business article that made my breath catch. Thornhill properties facing restructuring. Industry sources confirm major stakeholder. Exit and potential ownership change for premier coastal developer. The article quoted persons familiar with the situation, describing financial pressures and the sudden sale of Dominic's ownership stake to an undisclosed buyer. It mentioned the showcase event and noted Everett's unusual absence from portions of the proceedings. Most interestingly, it included speculation about the mysterious acquisitions of Thornhill properties over the past year, connecting those transactions to rumors of a strategic consolidation by a new market entrant. My name wasn't mentioned, but the groundwork was being laid for the revelation to come. I forwarded the article to Zora with a simple message: timing. Works in our favor. Deliver the offer as planned. The waiting game began. I spent the morning in methodical preparation, reviewing financial projections for the properties already acquired, conferring with Indira about management transitions, and finalizing plans for the Obsidian once it became mine. The property's potential was extraordinary, its location unmatched, its design visionary despite Everett's financial missteps. With proper management and realistic financial projections, it could become the cornerstone of my own emerging portfolio. At precisely 11:42 a.m., my phone rang. Everett's attorney, requesting an urgent meeting to discuss the offer. The meeting was set for 3 o'clock at the offices of Hargrove and Mitchell, a neutral territory chosen deliberately. Neither Thornhill Properties' sleek downtown headquarters nor my converted lighthouse would serve for this pivotal discussion. I arrived 15 minutes early, allowing the receptionist to guide me to a conference room overlooking Meridian's financial district. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city where Everett had first established his business. Credentials, long before his ambitions turned to Cascadia Bay's coastline. Zora sat beside me, reviewing notes while we waited. She had strategically arranged the seating so Everett would face the windows, the afternoon sun at my back creating a subtle psychological advantage. "He's bringing Lloyd Carson," she informed me, referring to Everett's longtime corporate attorney. "And Marcus Webb from Financial Restructuring." "Webb is interesting," I noted. "He specializes in distressed assets. Everett must be considering his options beyond simply rejecting our offer." The door opened precisely at 3. Everett entered first, followed by 2 men in conservative suits: Carson, whom I'd met many times during my marriage, and Webb, whose reputation for salvaging failing companies preceded him. Everett had made an effort with his appearance, his tailored suit and polished demeanor projecting confidence despite the shadows beneath his eyes. Our gazes locked briefly before he took his seat across the table. "Thalia," he acknowledged, his tone carefully neutral. "You're looking well." "Thank you," I replied simply, turning my attention to the others. "Mr. Carson, good to see you again. And Mr. Webb, your reputation precedes you." Webb nodded, slightly surprised at being recognized. "Mrs. Thornhill?" "Ms. Cavos," I corrected gently. "I've reverted to my family name." "Of course," Webb adjusted smoothly. "I understand you've put forward an acquisition proposal." Zora opened her portfolio. "My client has presented a comprehensive offer for the remaining Thornhill Properties assets, including the Obsidian development. The terms are detailed in the documents delivered this morning." Carson cleared his throat. "We've reviewed your proposal. While we appreciate the interest, the terms are simply not acceptable." "Which terms specifically?" I asked, maintaining eye contact with Everett rather than his attorney. Carson began to answer, but Everett raised a hand to silence him. "The price, for starters," he said, his voice steady despite the tension evident in his posture. "You're undervaluing the portfolio by at least 20%, and the non-compete clause is excessive and unnecessary." I nodded, acknowledging his points without conceding them. "The valuation reflects current market realities, not projected potential. As for the non-compete clause, it's standard protection for a buyer assuming a distressed portfolio with significant brand investment." Everett's jaw tightened at the word distressed, but he maintained his composure. "Thornhill Properties is not distressed. We're in a strategic transition following Dominic's decision to pursue other opportunities. A transition accelerated by 3 rejected loan applications for the Obsidian's final phase," I countered, "and complicated by the environmental issues at the harbor development site. Let's not pretend we're negotiating from equal positions, Everett." The brutal frankness hung in the air between us. Carson and Webb exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the personal undercurrents flowing beneath the business discussion. Everett leaned forward, placing his folded hands on the table. "Why don't we address the elephant in the room, Thalia? This isn't just a business acquisition for you. This is personal." "On the contrary," I replied smoothly. "I'm approaching this as purely business. You created a vulnerable asset through overexpansion and inadequate capital reserves. I recognized the opportunity and acted accordingly. The fact that I have intimate knowledge of your business practices is simply an advantage any savvy investor would capitalize on." A muscle worked in Everett's jaw. "And the 7 properties you've already acquired through various shell companies? Was that purely business as well?" I allowed myself a small smile. "Strategic acquisitions through proper corporate entities is standard industry practice. I learned from watching you, after all." Webb cleared his throat, clearly trying to steer the conversation back to practical matters. "Perhaps we could focus on potential areas for negotiation. The price point for the Obsidian, for instance, is non-negotiable," I finished firmly. "The offer reflects exactly what has been invested to date, allowing Mr. Thornhill to exit without loss. Given the financing challenges, that's more than fair." Carson began shuffling through papers. "Our counter-proposal maintains Everett's ownership interest in the Obsidian while divesting the other remaining properties at a 15% premium over your offered price." Zora and I exchanged glances. This was unexpected. Everett seemed willing to sell most of his remaining portfolio, but was fighting to keep the Obsidian. It was both his flagship development and his most vulnerable asset, the one most dependent on immediate capital infusion. "That's not acceptable," Zora replied. "Our client's offer is for the complete portfolio. Cherry-picking assets defeats the purpose of the acquisition." Everett's eyes remained locked with mine, something unreadable in their depths. "The Obsidian," is non-negotiable from our side as well. It's the cornerstone of Thornhill Properties' future positioning. I studied him carefully, processing this unexpected stance. The obsidian was bleeding him dry financially, yet he was fighting hardest to keep it. This wasn't just business calculation, it was emotional attachment, perhaps even ego. The building had been his most ambitious vision, the physical manifestation of his arrival at the upper echelons of coastal development. A cornerstone requires a foundation, I observed. Without the capital to complete the final phase, the obsidian becomes a liability, not an asset. The interest payments alone on your current construction loans exceed projected revenue for the next 18 months. Webb shifted uncomfortably, confirming my assessment was accurate. Everett's expression hardened. You seem remarkably well informed about our financial position. I pay attention to details, I replied. Something you might have noticed about me if you hadn't been so busy constructing your own narrative. The personal jab landed visibly. Everett's jaw clenched, but before he could respond, Carson intervened. Perhaps we should take a brief recess, he suggested. 15 minutes to consider positions? Zora nodded. That seems reasonable. As the men filed out, I remained seated, watching Everett's rigid back as he exited. When the door closed, Zora turned to me with raised eyebrows. He's fighting harder than expected for the obsidian, she noted, despite it being his biggest financial drain. It's not about finances for him, I replied. It's about legacy. The obsidian was meant to be his masterpiece, the development, that would cement his reputation as visionary rather than merely successful. Zora considered this. So what's our play? Accept the counteroffer for the other properties and pursue the obsidian separately? I shook my head. No. We maintain our position, all or nothing. I tapped my fingers thoughtfully against the table. But we need to understand why he's willing to sacrifice everything else to keep the obsidian. There's something we're missing. While Zora stepped out to make a call, I moved to the windows, gazing out at the city below. Meridian had been transformed. Over the past decade, its skyline punctuated by ambitious new developments catering to the tech industry's migration north from Silicon Valley. Everett had been part of that transformation, but had pivoted to Cascadia Bay when the competition in Meridian became too fierce. He had always been drawn to emerging markets where he could position himself as a pioneer rather than compete directly with established developers. The obsidian was meant to be his legacy project, larger, more luxurious, more visionary than anything he had previously attempted. But why fight so hard for it now, when divesting would give him the capital to start fresh elsewhere? Something didn't add up. The door opened behind me, and I turned, expecting Zora. Instead, Everett stood in the doorway alone, his expression guarded. "May I speak with you privately?" he asked, closing the door behind him before I could answer. I gestured to the chair across from me. "I assume your attorneys advised against this." "They did," he confirmed, remaining standing. "But this conversation needs to happen without the legal filters." I considered him carefully, noting the tension in his shoulders, the carefully controlled expression that nevertheless revealed strain around his eyes. This was not the confident, borderline arrogant man who had dismissed me with a cruel note, taped to our front door. "All right," I agreed, returning to my seat. "Speak." Everett paced briefly before facing me. "I need you to understand something about the obsidian. It's not just another development for me. The structural innovations, the sustainability features, the integration with the coastline, it's the culmination of everything I've learned and aspired to in architecture and development." "I'm aware of its significance to you," I replied. "That doesn't change the financial realities." "I'm not asking you to ignore the finances," he countered. "I'm asking you to consider an alternative approach." He drew a deep breath. "A partnership." I couldn't contain my surprise. "A partnership?" after everything that's happened? A business partnership, he clarified quickly. You clearly have the resources I underestimated. I have the vision and market reputation for the obsidian specifically. Together, we could complete it as originally designed, rather than risk seeing it compromised by purely financial considerations. I studied him, searching for the manipulation beneath the proposal. You expect me to believe you're willing to partner with the woman you called a worthless burden? The one you claimed couldn't survive without you? Everett flinched visibly at the reminder of his words. I was wrong, Thalia. Spectacularly, monumentally wrong. About you, about your capabilities, about who you are. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of genuine agitation. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am asking you to consider the project itself, separate from our personal history. The proposal was unexpected, the apparent sincerity even more so. I found myself genuinely considering it for a moment, the satisfaction of completing the obsidian as a partner, rather than a conqueror, demonstrating my value through collaboration rather than opposition. But then I remembered standing outside our home, reading his dismissive note. The casual cruelty, the absolute confidence that I was nothing without him. No, I said finally. I won't partner with you, Everett. Not now, not ever again. His expression tightened. Because of pride? Or because you'd rather destroy what I built than see it succeed with my involvement? Because trust, once broken, doesn't mend through business arrangements, I replied simply. You showed me exactly who you are in your unguarded moments. I believe that version of you, not the one standing here now offering compromises because you've run out of alternatives. Everett stared at me for a long moment, something complicated passing behind his eyes. Then at least tell me why the obsidian specifically. You could have pursued any number of development opportunities with your resources. Why focus so intently on dismantling what I built? The question deserved an honest answer, if only to bring this chapter to its proper close. Because you used it to define me, I said quietly. Every time you spoke about the obsidian, you cast it as the physical proof of your success, the success that allegedly justified treating me as decorative rather than substantive. You made it the monument to your superiority. I met his gaze directly. So yes, I want it. Not to destroy it, but to transform it into something even more extraordinary than you envisioned. Something that will stand as my definition of myself, not yours. The raw honesty hung between us, too real for either of us to deflect with business jargon or legal positioning. Everett's expression shifted through several emotions: anger, remorse, and finally, a grudging respect. You'll have Carson's formal response to your offer by tomorrow morning, he said finally, moving toward the door, but our position on the obsidian remains unchanged. After he left, I remained seated, processing the unexpected confrontation. There was something I was still missing about his attachment to the obsidian, something beyond ego or legacy that made him willing to sacrifice everything else to maintain control of that specific property. Zora returned, her expression curious. Everything all right? I saw Everett leave. He offered a partnership for the obsidian, I informed her. I declined. Her eyebrows shot up. Bold move on his part. Desperate, even. Yes, I agreed. And that's what concerns me. Everett doesn't do desperate without reason. I tapped my fingers against the table thoughtfully. I need you to dig deeper into the obsidian's paperwork, not just the financing and permits we've already reviewed, but anything unusual, special. Zoning variances, environmental exceptions, development rights that might transfer with ownership. You think there's something he's not disclosing? I think there's a reason he's fighting hardest for the property that's hurting him most financially, I replied, and I want to know what it is before we make our next move. The meeting concluded. Shortly after, with Carson formally rejecting our offer and presenting the counter-proposal in writing, As expected, it maintained Everett's full ownership of the Obsidian while divesting the other properties at a premium. Webb emphasized that this represented their best and final position, a standard negotiating tactic that rarely proved accurate. As we left the building, I noticed Everett standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows in the lobby, his back to the entrance, phone pressed to his ear. His posture conveyed tension, the set of his shoulders suggesting the conversation was not proceeding, as he wished. He didn't see us leave, too absorbed in whatever crisis now demanded his attention. Back at the perch, I convened an emergency strategy session with my core team, Zora, Indira, and 2 financial analysts we had brought on to manage the growing portfolio of acquired properties. Spread across the dining table were detailed maps of Cascadia Bay's coastline, ownership records for adjacent properties, and financial projections for various scenarios. "There has to be something we're missing about the Obsidian," I insisted, pacing the length of the room. "Everett is many things, but financially irrational isn't one of them. His decision to sacrifice everything else to keep that specific property defies standard business logic." Indira, always the most pragmatic of the group, studied the coastal map thoughtfully. "What about the surrounding parcels? Could there be a planned development that would increase the Obsidian's value beyond current projections?" "We've checked the Planning Commission records," one of the analysts replied. "Nothing unusual in the pipeline for that area." "What about beneath the surface?" Zora suggested suddenly. "Mineral rights, underwater cables, something in the geological surveys?" The question triggered a memory, a conversation at one of the countless dinner parties I'd hosted, Everett slightly intoxicated, speaking excitedly to a potential investor about future-proofing the Obsidian. I had assumed he meant the sustainability features, but what if there was more? "Check the geological surveys," I instructed the team, "and the original land acquisition documents. There might be something in the fine print that explains his attachment." As the others dived into research, my phone chimed with a news alert. The headline made my heart race. "Breaking: Thornhill Properties Facing Potential Takeover by Ex-Wife." The article named me explicitly, outlining my systematic acquisition of Thornhill Properties and Dominic's stake. It quoted sources close to the negotiations, describing the current standoff over the Obsidian and speculating about Everett's increasingly precarious financial position. Within minutes, my phone began buzzing with calls and messages. Old friends, business contacts, even journalists seeking comments. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the immediate question. Who had leaked the story, and why now? Everett's? "Trying to control the narrative," Zora suggested when I showed her the article. "By putting it out publicly, he's hoping to make it a matter of personal drama rather than business strategy. The vengeful ex-wife angle might generate sympathy among potential investors. Or he's trying to flush out competitive bidders," I countered, "creating a public auction scenario for the Obsidian to drive up the price beyond what I've offered." Before we could debate further, Indira burst into the room clutching a file. "Found it," she announced triumphantly, "and it's bigger than we thought." She spread several documents across the table, pointing to specific paragraphs highlighted in neon yellow. The Obsidian site has special deepwater access rights that weren't included in the public permits. Everett obtained a unique variance allowing construction of a private marina with direct ocean access, the only such rights granted in Cascadia Bay in the past 20 years. "That's valuable, but not game-changing," I noted, scanning the documents. "The marina is just the beginning," Indira continued, flipping to another page. "The real value is in what the deepwater access enables. 3 months ago, Meridian Technologies signed a preliminary agreement to use the Obsidian as the coastal landing point for their new Trans-Pacific data cable, a direct digital pipeline to Asian markets. The implications were immediately clear. Such infrastructure would transform the Obsidian from a luxury residential development into crucial digital infrastructure, increasing its value exponentially beyond current projections. This changes everything, Zora breathed. With that agreement in place, the Obsidian isn't just prime real estate, it's a strategic digital asset. And Everett never disclosed this in the negotiations, I added, anger rising at the deliberate omission. He's presenting it as a distressed luxury development while secretly positioning it as essential digital infrastructure. I picked up my phone, snapping pictures of the key documents. Forward these to Lloyd Carson immediately, along with a message. Our original offer stands, with one modification. We'll increase the price for the Obsidian by 15%, contingent upon full disclosure of all agreements related to the property, including the Meridian Technologies contract. As Zora composed the message, I continued studying the documents, noting the dates and signatures. The Meridian Technologies agreement had been signed just weeks after our divorce was finalized, suggesting Everett had been working on this transformation, while still presenting himself to me as solely a luxury developer. Had he hidden this potential from me during our marriage? Or had the opportunity emerged only afterward? Either way, the discovery reinforced what I had come to understand about the man I had once loved. His vision extended only to his own advancement, with others serving merely as accessories to his ambition. My phone rang, Everett's number flashing on the screen. Apparently, Carson had wasted no time forwarding our message. I accepted the call, switching to speaker mode so my team could hear. Hello, Everett. His voice was tight, controlled. About Meridian Technologies. I know you deliberately misrepresented the Obsidian's strategic position during negotiations, I replied calmly. A rather significant omission, wouldn't you say? The agreement is preliminary, non-binding, but potentially transformative. For the property's valuation, I interrupted, which you knew when presenting it as merely a luxury development facing financing challenges. Business negotiations always involve strategic information management, he countered, his tone shifting to the confident developer persona I knew so well. You would have done the same. Perhaps, I conceded, but I wouldn't have proposed a partnership without disclosing such a material detail. That crosses the line from strategic to deceptive. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken accusations. My offer stands, I continued finally, with the adjusted price for the Obsidian, contingent upon full disclosure of all agreements. Your attorney has the details. Everett's laugh held no humor. You're still undervaluing it, even with the adjustment. The Meridian Technologies contract alone doubles the property's potential revenue stream. Only if the final agreement is signed and the infrastructure is built, I countered. Currently, you lack the capital to complete the Obsidian's basic construction, let alone the specialized modifications the data cable would require. Another silence, this one calculated rather than reactive. When Everett spoke again, his voice had taken on a new tone, one I recognized from countless business deals I had witnessed during our marriage. It was his closing position, the final stance before either agreement or walking away. I'll sell you everything, the entire remaining portfolio, including the Obsidian, at your adjusted offer price with 2 non-negotiable conditions. I glanced at Zora, who had stopped typing to listen intently. I'm listening. First, public acknowledgement of my architectural vision for the Obsidian. My name remains on the building as its designer, regardless of ownership changes. Pride, always his driving force. Acceptable, provided all marketing materials clearly indicate current ownership. And the second condition? A seat on the development committee for the Obsidian's final phase. Non-controlling, advisory only, but with guaranteed input on design decisions related to the Meridian Technologies integration. This was unexpected, a request for continued involvement rather than a clean break. I muted the phone, turning to my team. Thoughts? It's a trap, Indira warned immediately. He'll use the position to undermine your authority, delay decisions, potentially sabotage the project. Or he genuinely cares about seeing his vision completed correctly, Zora countered. The Meridian technology's integration is complex. His knowledge could be valuable. I considered both perspectives, weighing the risks against pragmatic benefits. Unmuting the phone, I delivered my decision. Advisory position accepted, with strict limitations. You'll receive project updates and may submit recommendations, but all final decisions remain exclusively with my team. Your involvement ends completely upon project completion. These terms will be precisely defined in the acquisition agreement. Everett's exhale was audible. Relief, resignation, or perhaps both. Have Carson draft the agreement. We'll review and respond by tomorrow noon. After the call ended, my team stared at me with mixed expressions of triumph and concern. You realize what just happened, Zora said, breaking the silence. You won. He's selling everything, including the obsidian. I nodded, processing the reality of the victory that had seemed so distant 8 months ago. Yes, but the real challenge begins now. What do you mean? Indira asked. Acquiring the properties was the hard part. No, I replied, moving to the windows overlooking the bay, where the obsidian's distinctive silhouette was visible in the distance. The hard part is transforming them into something extraordinary, something that represents my vision, not his. That's the true victory I'm after. The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind of legal documents, financial transfers, and strategic planning. Carson delivered the draft agreement by evening, the terms largely as discussed, with predictable attempts to broaden Everett's advisory role that Zora efficiently neutralized in the counterdraft. By noon the following day, we had reached final agreement terms. The signing was scheduled for 4 o'clock at Hargrove and Mitchell's offices, a formal conclusion to the negotiation that had begun there just a day earlier. I chose my outfit carefully for the occasion. A tailored emerald green suit that projected confidence without ostentation. As I applied a final touch of lipstick, I studied my reflection in the mirror, searching for traces of the woman who had once defined herself primarily as Everett Thornhill's wife. She was gone, replaced by someone with clearer eyes and a straighter spine, someone who understood her own value independent of others' assessments. When I arrived at the law offices, the conference room had been arranged for the signing ceremony, with the acquisition documents laid out in precise stacks at each place setting. Zora was already there, conferring quietly with the paralegal handling the filing. She looked up as I entered, offering a small nod of encouragement. "Everything in order?" I asked, setting my portfolio on the table. "All set," she confirmed. "Funds are prepared for transfer upon signature verification. Property deed transfers will be filed electronically immediately afterward." I took my seat, maintaining outward calm despite the significance of the moment. This was the culmination of 8 months of strategic planning, financial maneuvering, and personal transformation. The reclamation not just of property, but of my own narrative. The door opened, and Everett entered with Carson and Webb. He had dressed formally as well, in a charcoal suit that emphasized the weight he had lost over recent months. Our eyes met briefly as he took his seat across from me, his expression unreadable. Carson began the proceedings with a formal overview of the agreement terms, the complete acquisition of all remaining Thornhill Properties assets, including the obsidian, Everett's limited advisory role on the development committee, the preservation of his name as architectural designer, and the financial terms we had negotiated. As Carson spoke, I observed Everett's profile, noting the tension in his jaw, the careful control he maintained over his expression. This moment represented a profound loss for him, not just of his company and properties, but of the identity he had constructed around them. For the first time, I felt a flicker of empathy beneath my determination. I understood, better than most, how it felt to have one's identity forcibly reconstructed by another's actions. When Carson finished his summary, he slid the main acquisition agreement toward us. If there are no further questions, we'll proceed with signatures. Everett picked up his pen, hesitating just a moment before signing his name with the confident flourish I had seen countless times on checks, contracts, and our marriage license. He slid the document to me without comment. I signed my name. Below his, the action both mundane and monumental. With those strokes of ink, Thornhill Properties effectively ceased to exist as Everett's domain, and the empire he had spent a decade building became mine. The remainder of the signing proceeded, efficiently, each document transferring another piece of what had once defined Everett Thornhill's success to my ownership. Throughout the process, he maintained his composure, speaking only when necessary to confirm understanding of specific clauses. When the final document was signed, Carson nodded to Webb, who initiated the electronic funds transfer that would complete the transaction. My phone chimed moments later with confirmation from my bank that the funds had been disbursed. "Congratulations, Ms. Cavos," Carson said formally. "The acquisition is complete." The words hung in the air, marking the definitive end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Everett stood, buttoning his suit jacket with the practiced motion of someone accustomed to concluding business meetings, though never one quite like this. "I'll have my office send over the complete design files for the Obsidian," he said, his voice professionally detached, "including the preliminary modifications for the Meridian Technologies integration." "Thank you," I replied, equally formal. "My team will review them and establish a communication protocol for your advisory input." He nodded once, then extended his hand across the table. "Congratulations. You've accomplished something remarkable, Thalia." I accepted the handshake. The brief contact oddly final, like closing a door on a room I would never enter again. "Thank you, Everett." As he turned to leave with his attorneys, I found myself speaking again, impelled by some need for genuine closure beyond the legal formalities. "Everett." He paused, looking back. "For what it's worth, I hope you find success in your next venture," I said sincerely. "Just perhaps with a better understanding of the people around you." A complex emotion flickered across his features, regret, perhaps, or simple acknowledgement of the truth in my words. He inclined his head slightly. "I won't make the same mistakes again. That much I can promise." With that, he left the room, Carson and Webb following behind. When the door closed, Zora let out a long breath. "It's done. You now own every property that once bore the Thornhill name." I nodded, the reality still settling into my consciousness. Yes. Now the real work begins. We gathered our documents and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed, Zora studied me curiously. "No victory celebration? You've accomplished exactly what you set out to do." I smiled, thinking of the perch with its commanding view of the coastline. My coastline now, in a very real sense. "The celebration can wait. I have plans to review, a development committee to assemble, and a data cable infrastructure to integrate." Zora laughed softly. "Always focused on the next horizon. Everett never really knew you at all, did he?" "No," I agreed as the elevator descended. "But the important thing is that I know myself now." Outside, the afternoon sun illuminated Cascadia Bay in the distance, the water shimmering with possibility. Somewhere along that shoreline, Everett Thornhill was confronting a future very different from the one he had envisioned, and I was stepping into a future entirely of my own making, one property, one decision, one day at a time. The news of my acquisition broke across industry publications by morning. Thalia Cavos acquires full Thornhill portfolio, headlined the Meridian Business Journal, with subheadings detailing the estimated value of the transaction and speculating about my plans for the properties, particularly the Obsidian. The article included a photo from the Cascadia Bay property showcase, capturing me in the midnight blue dress with the coastline-inspired structural elements, looking directly at the camera with a confidence that seemed to have always been there. My phone began ringing at 6:30. Calls from journalists, industry contacts, and even old friends who had maintained relationships with both Everett and me during the divorce. I let them all go to voicemail, focusing instead on reviewing the detailed files Everett had sent over regarding the Obsidian's Meridian Technologies integration. The plans were impressive, even visionary. Everett had designed specialized infrastructure that would house the data cable landing facilities while maintaining the luxurious aesthetic of the residential units above. The engineering challenges were significant, but the solutions elegant. Exactly the kind of technically complex, aesthetically uncompromising approach that had initially drawn me to Everett's work years ago. I spent the morning at the Perch, with Indira and the 2 project managers we had recruited to oversee the practical aspects of the transition. The dining table had evolved into a command center, covered now with architectural renderings, construction timelines, and market analyses for each property in the newly expanded portfolio. "We need to consolidate the branding immediately," Indira suggested, gesturing to the stack of materials bearing the Thornhill Properties logo. "Public perception will be critical during this transition." I nodded, examining the mock-ups her team had prepared for Kavos Coastal Holdings, the new corporate identity we had developed over the past month in anticipation of the acquisition. The design featured a stylized lighthouse silhouette, a nod to the Perch and its significance as the starting point of my journey. "Begin with digital assets and property signage," I instructed, "but coordinate with the PR team on timing. I want the rebrand to feel like transformation, not erasure." As Indira made notes, my assistant Maya entered with a tablet displaying the morning's social media monitoring report. The acquisition was trending in regional business circles, with commentary ranging from professional analysis to outright gossip. Most interesting were the responses from women in the industry, messages of quiet solidarity, congratulations tinged with knowing satisfaction, and inquiries about potential collaboration opportunities. "The Women's Business Alliance wants to know if you'd speak at their quarterly leadership forum," Maya informed me. "The theme is Reclaiming Spaces, Women in Male-Dominated Industries." I considered the invitation thoughtfully. Until now, I had operated largely in the shadows, focusing on strategy rather than publicity. The acquisition changed that dynamic, thrusting me into a spotlight I hadn't necessarily sought, but could potentially use to advantage. Except provisionally, I decided. After we've completed the initial transition phase for the Obsidian and Maya, schedule meetings with the existing property management teams for all the newly acquired sites. I want personal introductions before any structural changes are announced. Maya nodded, adding the instruction to her already substantial task list. As she left, Zora arrived with the morning's legal briefings and a curious expression. "Have you seen the statement?" she asked, handing me her phone. On the screen was a press release issued by Everett's personal publicist rather than Thornhill Properties' corporate communications team. The statement was brief but notably gracious. "After a decade of development in Cascadia Bay, I am pleased to see my portfolio, including the Obsidian, transition to the capable hands of Thalia Kavos. Ms. Kavos brings exceptional vision and strategic insight to coastal development, and I'm confident the properties will flourish under her direction. I look forward to my advisory role on the Obsidian's final phase and to watching Cascadia Bay's continued evolution." I read it twice, searching for the veiled barbs or passive-aggressive undertones I had expected. Finding none, I returned the phone to Zora with a puzzled expression. "Surprisingly magnanimous," I observed. "Not at all what I anticipated." Zora shrugged. Maybe losing everything provided some perspective, or maybe his PR team insisted on the high road to preserve what's left of his reputation. Perhaps, I agreed, though something about the statement's tone felt genuinely Everett, the emphasis on vision and strategy, the professional acknowledgement of capability. It was how he had always spoken about respected competitors, never about me during our marriage. I put the matter aside as we moved into a detailed review of the construction timeline for the Obsidian. The project had fallen behind schedule during Everett's financial struggles, with several key contractors placing liens on the property due to late payments. Those issues had been resolved through the acquisition funding, but we now faced the challenge of rebuilding relationships with subcontractors who had been burned by the previous management. By late afternoon, I was ready for my first official site visit as the new owner. I chose to begin with the Obsidian, the most significant property in terms of both financial investment and personal meaning. The visit had been arranged with minimal advance notice, allowing me to observe operations in their natural state, rather than a prepared presentation. As my car approached the construction entrance, I noticed the Thornhill Properties sign still prominently displayed at the site's perimeter, a visual reminder of how recent the transition had been. The security guard checked my identification with visible surprise, clearly not expecting the owner to arrive in person without an entourage. The site manager, Eli Marshall, met me at the construction office, a collection of trailers at the building's base, adorned with architectural renderings and construction schedules. Marshall had worked with Everett for nearly 5 years and had overseen the Obsidian from groundbreaking through its current phase. His expression was carefully neutral as he greeted me, professional courtesy masking whatever opinions he might hold about the ownership change. Ms. Cavos, welcome to the Obsidian. We've prepared a tour route that will show you the current state of construction while maintaining proper safety protocols. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Before we begin, I'd like to review the updated timeline for the Meridian Technologies integration. I understand that's been a point of coordination challenge. A flicker of surprise crossed Marshall's face, perhaps at my direct knowledge of the project's technical aspects or my focus on solutions rather than status reports. He led me to a conference room where detailed schematic drawings covered the walls. The integration requires modifications to 3 lower levels, he explained, pointing to the relevant sections. The challenge has been sequencing these specialized installations without disrupting the luxury finishing work in the residential units above. I studied the schematics, noting areas where the design seemed overly complicated. These cooling system routings, they seem unnecessarily convoluted. Was there a structural reason for this approach? Marshall hesitated briefly. Mr. Thornhill had specific aesthetic requirements for all mechanical systems, even those in non-public areas. He believed in design integrity throughout the building. Admirable in concept, but potentially inefficient in practice, I observed. Please have the engineering team prepare alternative routings that prioritize functionality. We can maintain design integrity without sacrificing operational efficiency. As we continued the tour through the partially completed structure, I made mental notes of other areas where Everett's perfectionism had created unnecessary complications. His vision had been undeniably bold, but his execution sometimes prioritized form over function in ways that had contributed to the project's financial challenges. We ended the tour at what would eventually become the building's signature rooftop restaurant, currently an open concrete space with breathtaking views of Cascadia Bay. Construction materials were stacked along one wall, but the expanse provided a perfect vantage point to appreciate the Obsidian's commanding position on the waterfront. The panoramic view was Mr. Thornhill's primary design consideration, Marshall explained. The entire building was oriented to maximize these sightlines. I walked to the edge, taking in the sweep of the coastline, from the historic lighthouse district to the north to the marina development to the south. The perch was just visible in the distance, its distinctive silhouette a reminder of my own journey. The orientation is perfect, I agreed. But I'd like to reconsider the interior layout of the restaurant space. The current design places too many tables away from the windows. We should restructure to ensure more diners can enjoy this view directly. Marshall made a note on his tablet. I'll have the design team prepare alternatives. He hesitated, then added, some of these changes may conflict with Mr. Thornhill's advisory input. The agreement indicates he'll remain involved with design decisions. Mr. Thornhill's advisory role is limited to the Meridian Technologies integration, I clarified. All other design decisions fall under my authority as owner. Please make that distinction clear to your team. Marshall nodded, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts about this arrangement. As a longtime Thornhill employee, his loyalties were understandably complex in this transition. I appreciate your professionalism during this change, Mr. Marshall, I said as we returned to the site office. Continuity in project leadership is valuable, and I hope you'll consider remaining with us as we move forward. His surprise was evident this time. You're not bringing in your own construction management team? I believe in evaluating existing talent before making personnel changes, I replied. Your knowledge of this project is an asset, provided you're willing to embrace our revised vision and timeline. Marshall studied me for a moment, perhaps reassessing his preconceptions. I'm committed to seeing the Obsidian completed to the highest standards, Ms. Cavos. If your vision maintains that commitment, I'm interested in being part of it. Excellent. Please prepare a comprehensive status report on all active work streams, highlighting decision points that require immediate attention. We'll meet again next week to establish clear communication protocols and revised completion targets. As I left the construction site, I noticed workers watching with undisguised curiosity. Word of my visit had clearly spread throughout the BOM site, and I could imagine the conversations that would follow. Speculation about changes to come, concerns about job security, judgments about my qualifications to lead such an ambitious project. The coming weeks would be critical for establishing my leadership, not just as Everett's replacement, but as a developer with my own distinct vision and approach. The challenge would be maintaining the project's integrity while making the necessary changes to ensure its financial and operational success. Back at the perch, I found Indira reviewing applications from potential candidates for our expanded management team. The acquisition had nearly tripled our property portfolio overnight, requiring significant scaling of our operational infrastructure. How was the site visit? She asked, looking up from her tablet. Revealing, I replied, pouring myself a cup of tea from the pot on the counter. The Obsidian is even more ambitious than I remembered, but also more troubled. Everett's perfectionism created unnecessary complications in several key systems. Indira nodded knowingly. Typical. He never could distinguish between visionary and impractical. She slid a folder across the counter toward me. Speaking of which, you've received a detailed proposal from our advisory team for the Obsidian's interior redesign. They've incorporated your feedback from the preliminary discussions. I opened the folder to find renderings of a subtly transformed version of Everett's original concept. The architectural bones remained intact, but the interior spaces had been reconfigured for greater functionality and a warmer aesthetic. Most notably, the public areas featured local materials and artwork, a departure from Everett's preference for imported luxury finishes. This feels right, I said, studying the images. It honors the structural integrity of the original design, while creating spaces that feel more connected to Cascadia Bay rather than imposed upon it. That's what we aimed for, Indira confirmed. A building that celebrates its location rather than dominating it. Which reminds me, the environmental consultants will be here tomorrow to discuss enhanced sustainability features for all the properties. They have some interesting ideas for water reclamation systems that could become a signature element of the Cavos Coastal Holdings brand. The mention of branding reminded me of another pressing matter. Has the PR team prepared the formal announcement of the consolidated portfolio? Indira nodded, retrieving another folder from her briefcase. Draft press release, media talking points, and a proposed schedule for the public rollout. They're recommending a formal event at the Obsidian site. Once the new signage is in place, a symbolic reclaiming of the flagship property. I reviewed the materials, appreciating the careful balance struck between acknowledging the property's history and emphasizing the new direction under my leadership. The press release included a quote attributed to me that captured exactly what I hoped to convey. These properties represent not just valuable real estate, but the evolving story of Cascadia Bay itself. Under Kavos Coastal Holdings, they will become true community assets, developmentally ambitious while environmentally respectful, luxurious while authentically connected to the region's character and needs. Perfect, I approved. Schedule the announcement for next Tuesday. And arrange site visits to all the other properties before then. I want to have first-hand knowledge of the entire portfolio before speaking publicly about our plans. The next morning brought unexpected news via a text message from Dominic. Reeves. Thought you should know, Everett's leaving Cascadia Bay. Accepted position with Singapore Development Group. Starts next month. The information was surprising but logical. Everett had always been adaptable, quick to pivot when circumstances changed. With his reputation in Cascadia Bay complicated by the very public acquisition of his properties, a fresh start internationally made strategic sense. Still, I felt an unexpected twinge at the thought of him leaving the region entirely, as if a chapter was closing more definitively than I had anticipated. I forwarded the information to Zora with a brief note. How does this affect his advisory? Role for the Obsidian? Her response came quickly. Contract specified remote consultation is acceptable. He's still bound by the terms regardless of location. The news of Everett's departure circulated quickly through Cascadia Bay's business community. By afternoon, it had been confirmed by a brief announcement from his publicist, noting his exciting new opportunity to bring West Coast design sensibilities to Asian luxury markets. The statement made no reference to me or the recent acquisition, presenting the move as a planned career progression rather than a response to changed circumstances. That evening, I received an email from Everett himself, the first direct communication since the acquisition signing. The message was brief but unexpectedly personal. Thalia, you've likely heard about my new position in Singapore. I wanted you to know directly that I remain committed to my advisory role for the Obsidian. Distance won't affect my availability for consultation on the Meridian Technologies integration. On a personal note, seeing you at the Cascadia Bay property showcase was illuminating in ways I'm still processing. You were always extraordinary. I just failed to see it clearly. Everett. I read the message several times, unsure how to interpret its tone or intent. Was it professional courtesy, an attempt at personal reconciliation, or simply Everett's way of maintaining some connection to the property he still considered his masterpiece? Perhaps all three. After careful consideration, I composed a reply that matched his professional tone while acknowledging the personal element. Everett, congratulations on the Singapore position. I appreciate your commitment to the Obsidian's completion and will ensure you receive regular updates on the Meridian Technologies integration as outlined in our agreement. I wish you success in this new chapter. Thalia. Brief, cordial, definitive. Much like our interaction at the signing, it felt like the careful closing of a door, not slammed in anger but firmly shut nonetheless. With Everett's departure imminent, my focus turned fully to establishing Kavos Coastal Holdings as a distinct entity, rather than merely Thornhill properties under new management. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Site visits to every property in the portfolio, meetings with existing management teams, development of new design standards, and coordination with the Meridian Technologies team on the data cable infrastructure requirements. The formal announcement event was scheduled for Tuesday morning at the Obsidian site, where the new Kavos Coastal Holdings signage had been installed overnight, the stylized lighthouse logo now prominently displayed where Thornhill Properties' angular emblem had stood for years. We had invited key stakeholders, community leaders, and select media representatives for a presentation of our vision for the consolidated portfolio. I arrived early, wanting time to center myself before the public scrutiny began. The site had been transformed for the occasion, with a small stage set up facing the partially completed structure of the Obsidian, its distinctive silhouette backdropped by the morning sky. Display boards showcased renderings of our planned modifications, emphasizing enhanced sustainability features and community integration elements. Marshall met me at the entrance, looking somewhat uncomfortable in formal attire rather than his usual construction site gear. "Everything's ready, Ms. Cavos. The team has prepared the presentation materials according to your specifications." "Thank you, Eli. And thank you for agreeing to speak today." Having the project manager address the technical aspects lends credibility to our commitment to continuity. He nodded, still adjusting to the collaborative leadership style I had established, so different from Everett's top-down directives. The crews appreciate the clear communication. It's reduced anxiety about the transition. As we walked toward the presentation area, I spotted Zora speaking with several local officials near the refreshment table. She excused herself when she saw me, her expression unusually concerned. "We have an unexpected situation," she said quietly, guiding me toward a private corner. "Everett is here." I blinked in surprise. "Here? At the announcement?" "He arrived about 10 minutes ago. Said he was exercising his right as advisory consultant to be informed about project developments." I considered this unexpected complication. Technically, Everett was within his contractual rights to attend project-related events, though his presence at this particular announcement seemed deliberately provocative. "Where is he now?" "Speaking with some of the contractors near the building entrance. He's being careful not to draw too much attention, but people have definitely noticed." I took a moment to process this development, weighing various responses. Asking him to leave would create an unnecessary scene and potentially undermine the professional image I wanted to project. Ignoring his presence entirely might seem petty or insecure. Incorporate him, I decided. Add a brief acknowledgement of his architectural vision to my remarks, and have a seat reserved in the appropriate section, not on stage, but not hidden away either. Let's demonstrate confidence through inclusion rather than exclusion. Zora nodded approvingly. "Handled with grace. I'll make the arrangements." As guests began to arrive, I circulated among them, greeting community leaders and introducing myself to those who had primarily dealt with Everett in the past. I was conscious of his presence on the periphery of these conversations, watching the easy rapport I established with people who had once been his business contacts. Precisely at 10 o'clock, Maya signaled that it was time to begin. I took my place at the podium, surveying the assembled group, a mix of familiar faces and new stakeholders, all curious about the future of properties that defined much of Cascadia Bay's luxury landscape. "Good morning, and thank you for joining us at this significant moment for both Cavos Coastal Holdings and Cascadia Bay itself," I began, my voice steady and confident. "Today marks not just a change in ownership, but an evolution in vision for these remarkable properties. As I outlined our plans for the consolidated portfolio, emphasizing sustainability, community integration, and responsible luxury, I was aware of Everett seated in the front row, his expression carefully neutral. When I reached the portion of my remarks discussing the obsidian specifically, I included the acknowledgement we had prepared. The obsidian represents architectural ambition of the highest order. Its structural design, originally conceived by Everett Thornhill, creates a landmark that will define Cascadia Bay's waterfront for generations. Under Cavos Coastal Holdings, we will honor that architectural vision while enhancing its functionality, sustainability, and integration with emerging technologies. Everett's expression shifted slightly at the mention, not quite a smile, but a subtle relaxation of tension, an acknowledgement of the professional respect offered. The remainder of the presentation proceeded smoothly, with Marshall explaining the technical aspects of the construction timeline, Indira outlining our property management philosophy, and finally, a representative from Meridian Technologies discussing the significance of the data cable project for regional connectivity. During the question and answer session that followed, a local reporter inevitably raised the personal dimension. "Ms. Cavos, given the unique circumstances of this acquisition following your divorce from Mr. Thornhill, how would you characterize The nature of this business transition? The assembled group grew quiet, aware of the potential for drama in my response. I noticed Everett shifting slightly in his seat, perhaps wondering how I would frame our history. I would characterize it as a testament to the power of accurate valuation, I replied with a small smile. In business as in life, success often comes from recognizing the true value of assets that others have underestimated. Cascadia Bay's premier properties deserved investment and leadership that appreciated their full potential. Kavos Coastal Holdings is committed to providing exactly that. The response earned appreciative nods from the business leaders present, who recognized the professional framing of what could have been treated as merely personal. The reporter tried again. And how would you describe your current working relationship with Mr. Thornhill, given his continued advisory role on the Obsidian? Professional, focused, and appropriately limited to his areas of technical expertise, I answered smoothly. The successful completion of the Obsidian benefits all stakeholders, including Mr. Thornhill as its original architect. Our agreement reflects that shared interest in the property's success. After the formal presentation concluded, attendees were invited to view the detailed renderings and enjoy refreshments. I circulated through the crowd, answering specific questions and building connections with key stakeholders. Eventually, as I knew would happen, I found myself face to face with Everett. "Nicely handled," he said quietly, gesturing toward the dispersing reporters. "You've always been skilled at navigating difficult questions." "Thank you for attending," I replied, matching his neutral tone. "Your presence demonstrated confidence in the project's continuity." He nodded, glancing toward the Obsidian's rising structure. "The modifications you've proposed are intelligent, especially the sustainability enhancements for the water systems." "High praise from the original architect," I acknowledged. "Will you have time to review the Meridian Technologies integration updates before your departure for Singapore?" "Already done. I sent my notes to Marshall yesterday." He hesitated, then added, "Singapore is 14 hours ahead of Cascadia Bay, but I'm committed to maintaining my advisory responsibilities. Distance won't be an issue." "I appreciate that." I maintained the professional tone that had defined our interaction since the acquisition, though I found myself curious about this new chapter he was beginning, whether it represented escape, opportunity, or simply pragmatic adaptation to changed circumstances. As if reading my thoughts, Everett added, "Singapore wasn't planned, but it's the right move. Fresh start, new challenges. Sometimes losing everything clarifies what actually matters." The statement hung between us, laden with potential meanings, beyond the superficial commentary on career changes. Before I could formulate a response, Maya approached to indicate another stakeholder was waiting to speak with me. "Safe travels, Everett," I said, offering my hand in a gesture that felt appropriately conclusive. "Marshall knows how to reach you if questions arise about the integration." He took my hand briefly, his expression thoughtful. "You've created something remarkable here, Thalia. Not just acquiring these properties, but reimagining them. It's what they deserved all along." With that unexpected compliment, he nodded once and moved away, stopping briefly to speak with Marshall before departing the event altogether. I watched him go, struck by the strange symmetry of the moment. Everett walking away from the Obsidian as I had once walked away from our shared home, each of us forced to reconsider deeply held assumptions about ourselves and our futures. The announcement event concluded successfully, with media coverage focusing primarily on the ambitious vision for the properties rather than the personal history between the former and current owners. By evening, Kavos Coastal Holdings was trending in regional business news, with analysts speculating about the potential impact of the consolidated portfolio on Cascadia Bay's luxury real estate market. Alone at the perch that night, I reviewed the day's events while watching the Obsidian's lights glowing in the distance across the bay. The building seemed different somehow, no longer a symbol of Everett's vision, but a canvas for my own, its potential limited only by imagination and execution rather than by someone else's expectations. My phone chimed with a message from Zora. "Perfect launch. You've officially transitioned from acquiring his empire to building your own. Congratulations." The observation was apt. Today had marked a psychological turning point, from the satisfaction of reclaiming what had been dismissed to the deeper fulfillment of creating something wholly new. The acquisition had been powerful, but the transformation would be my true legacy. I typed a response, "Thank you, but this is just the beginning." Setting down my phone, I turned my attention to the preliminary designs for the next phase of the Obsidian's development, the phase that would bear my signature aesthetically and functionally. The building would always carry elements of its original conception, just as I would always carry parts of the experiences that had shaped me. But what emerged would be distinctly, unmistakably mine, a creation reflecting not reaction or revenge, but genuine vision and purpose. The journey that had begun with a cruel dismissal taped to a door was evolving into something far more significant than its catalyst could have imagined. In underestimating me, Everett had unleashed a force that would reshape not just my life, but the very skyline of Cascadia Bay itself. And that transformation was only just beginning. 18 months transformed everything. Standing on the rooftop terrace of the Obsidian, now completed and fully operational, I watched the sunset paint Cascadia Bay in shades of amber and rose. The Meridian Technologies data cable had been successfully integrated, its landing facilities seamlessly incorporated into the building's lower levels, while the luxury residences above had sold out within 3 months of hitting the market. Testament to both the property's intrinsic value and the reputation Kavos Coastal Holdings had established in the wake of the acquisition. My transformation of Everett's former empire had been more comprehensive than anyone could have anticipated, even me. The coastal properties had been reimagined with a cohesive vision emphasizing sustainability, community integration, and authentic luxury rather than ostentatious display. The Promenade Hotel now featured rotating exhibitions from local artists. The Westridge Commercial Plaza had been reconfigured to include affordable studio spaces for creative businesses. Most significantly, the Obsidian had evolved from mere luxury residences to a landmark of forward-thinking design, its resource-efficient systems setting new standards for coastal development throughout the region. "Ms. Kavos?" Maya's voice came through my earpiece. "The guests are beginning to arrive." "I'll be right down," I replied, taking one final moment to appreciate the view that had once represented Everett's ambition and now symbolized my own achievement. Tonight marked the official grand opening of the Obsidian's rooftop restaurant, a space I had completely reconceived from Everett's original plans. Where he had envisioned an exclusive fine dining establishment accessible only to residents and their guests, I had created a public-private hybrid. A restaurant whose reservation system allocated 30% of tables to community members at accessible price points, ensuring that Cascadia Bay's most spectacular views would be enjoyed by a diverse clientele rather than just the wealthy few. The elevator descended smoothly to the lobby level, where Maya waited with final details for the evening's event. The first guest list included local officials, community leaders, financial partners, and media representatives, a carefully curated group chosen to highlight the property's significance beyond mere luxury real estate. "The governor's representative has arrived early," Maya informed me, "and the Meridian Technologies CEO is expected in 20 minutes. "Perfect. And the special arrangement we discussed?" Maya nodded. "Confirmed. The package will be delivered during your remarks, as requested." I smiled, anticipation mingling with a touch of nervous energy. Tonight represented more than just the completion of a building. It marked the fulfillment of the vision that had sustained me through the months of strategic acquisition and transformation. What had begun as reclamation had evolved into creation. The painful catalyst of rejection transformed into the precious fuel of determination. The lobby bustled with arriving guests, the space transformed for the evening with installations from local artists and displays highlighting the Obsidian's innovative features. I moved through the crowd with practiced ease, greeting investors who had initially doubted a newcomer's ability to complete such an ambitious project, community leaders who had been skeptical of my promises about accessibility, and former Thornhill employees who had chosen to remain under my leadership. Thalia. Indira appeared at my elbow, resplendent in an emerald gown that complemented her role as Kavos Coastal Holdings' chief operating officer. The Meridian Chronicle reporter is particularly interested in the data cable integration. I've scheduled 10 minutes for you to explain the economic impact before your main remarks. I nodded, scanning the crowd automatically as we spoke. Despite myself, I found I was looking for one particular face, a habit I had thought long broken. He confirmed. "He won't be attending," Zora said quietly, appearing beside me with uncanny timing, sent his regrets from Singapore along with this. She handed me a small envelope, my name written in Everett's distinctive handwriting. I slipped it into my clutch, unopened. Whatever message he had sent could wait until this milestone evening was complete. The event proceeded flawlessly. Guests marveled at the restaurant's dramatic panoramic views, enhanced by architectural features I had personally designed to frame specific vistas of Cascadia Bay. The menu showcased local ingredients, transformed through innovative techniques, a culinary philosophy that mirrored my approach to the properties themselves. As coffee was served, I took my place at the small podium positioned to allow all guests to see both me and the breathtaking nighttime view of the illuminated coastline. The room quieted expectantly. "Welcome to the crowning achievement of the Obsidian," I began, surveying the assembled guests. "This space represents not just the completion of a building, but the fulfillment of a vision for what Cascadia Bay can become. A community where luxury and accessibility coexist, where innovation serves inclusion, and where the most spectacular views belong not to the few but to the many." As I outlined the journey from conception to completion, I emphasized the collaborative nature of the achievement, acknowledging the construction teams, the designers, the financial partners, and the community advocates who had all contributed to transforming the Obsidian from one-man statement into a true community asset. 3 years ago, I received a message telling me I would never survive without someone else's support, that I was essentially worthless on my own, I said, my voice steady despite the personal nature of the revelation. Tonight, I stand before you not merely having survived, but having thrived. Not by tearing down, but by building up. Not by seeking revenge, but by pursuing vision. I gestured toward the glittering vista of Cascadia Bay visible through the restaurant's walls of glass. The true measure of our worth isn't in what others believe about us, but in what we create when we finally believe in ourselves. The Obsidian. Isn't my response to dismissal, it's my statement of possibility. As I concluded my remarks to warm applause, Maya approached with a sleek wooden box, the special delivery I had arranged. Opening it carefully, I removed a small brass plaque engraved with simple text. The Kavos Lighthouse Scholarship Fund, established in connection with the Obsidian, will provide annual educational grants to women pursuing studies in architecture, urban development, and sustainable design. May they build futures limited only by their imagination, never by others' expectations. I displayed the plaque to the assembled guests. Tonight, I'm pleased to announce the establishment of this fund with an initial endowment of $5 million. The first scholarships will be awarded this fall to 10 women from our community, ensuring that the Obsidian's legacy extends far beyond its physical structure. The announcement generated enthusiastic applause, particularly from the community, leaders who had championed educational access throughout Cascadia Bay. As guests mingled afterward, many approached to express their appreciation for this unexpected dimension of the project, the transformation of personal triumph into community opportunity. Later, As the event wound down, I found a quiet moment to open Everett's envelope. Inside was a simple note card containing a brief message. Thalia, I've followed the Obsidian's transformation from afar. What you've created exceeds anything I could have envisioned. My greatest error wasn't in the divorce, but in failing to recognize the extraordinary partner I already had. The building stands as testimony to your vision. My life serves as warning about the cost of underestimation. Congratulations on creating not just a landmark but a legacy. Everett. I read the note twice, appreciating its sincerity while recognizing it sought nothing. Neither reconciliation nor absolution. It was simply acknowledgement, perhaps the most honest communication we had ever shared. From the terrace of the now empty restaurant, I gazed out at the lights of Cascadia Bay, my eye drawn inevitably to the perch in the distance, the lighthouse that had been my refuge and launching point. Between that modest beginning and this spectacular achievement stretched a journey of self-discovery more valuable than any property portfolio. Everett had been wrong about me, but his underestimation had revealed a truth I might never have discovered otherwise, that the most powerful force in any woman's life isn't a partner's validation, but her own unwavering belief in possibilities others cannot yet see. I placed the note back in its envelope, tucking it away as a reminder not of what I had lost, but of what I had found. Not a husband, but myself. The true revenge wasn't in acquiring his properties, but in discovering that I had always been the architect of my own worth. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass, confident, accomplished, complete. The woman who had once been dismissed as worthless now owned not just every property in his former portfolio, but something far more valuable: the unshakable knowledge of her own capacity to transform rejection into a foundation for remarkable achievement. That was the real legacy of the Obsidian, not glass and steel, but resilience transmuted into triumph, hurt transformed into healing, and a future limited only by the boundaries of my own imagination. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.